So, guys, everybody listen up. What made you take on this project?
Roland Emmerich, of course.
Roland Emmerich.
Easy money. Because
Easy money is
Roland
always
Emmerich is such an easy
perfect
director
answer.
to work with, and so it's easy money.
Oh, that's so nice.
Any really deeper answer?
No.
Which is not superficial, and
Other than that, we're doing a movie that I also like to go see myself.
that's a good answer.
That's
See, that's what
And
I was
also,
looking for.
how often do movies like this come around? The answer is very rarely. So it's,
That's also
and you're
true.
a perfect fit for this movie.
Okay, so I was so impressed by your performances. So what?
I don't believe that for a second.
I wasn't impressed by that performance.
Did you like
Read that question again?
Yeah, I would like to.
Just bad acting.
What kind of research and preparation did you do? I think I hear that you like kind of went to Nimitz Museum. in
I did. I
Texas.
went to the Nimitz Museum outside of Austin, and where's that? Fredericksburg, I think. And I don't know. I just tried to learn as much as I can. I was fascinated by Chester Nimitz, and I feel like it might have been a very different war if the Japanese had had a guy like Nimitz.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
I grew 4 pounds of eyebrows to play Admiral Bull Halsey. He really had them going on. He didn't need shades. He was what a figure. What in American military history and American history. Just an incredible person and really kind of a spearhead as far as learning aircraft carrier war. Midway was the first, right?
what?
First battle between just aircraft carriers.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Coral
It's
Sea.
it's true.
The whole
Coral
fleet
Sea.
was there,
Coral
so-
Sea.
but-
You know, you remember when you like stand in the window and you see
Yeah.
two carriers.
As far
like
as being a
down.
set piece, though.
Yeah. Okay. So, anybody else? Ed?
I mean, everyone's having so much fun saying silly answers. I'm reticent to say something to tell the truth. But
Tell the truth.
yeah, I did no research. No.
Not with a name like Dick
Le-
Van.
every
Because none of us did either, really.
I mean, every role, you know, the first thing, the first way I approach it is, you know, just from the black and white of the character, you know. So I approach it from a, you know, emotional context and point of view and emotional state of being. But then after that, there were so many accounts. You know, Clarence Dickinson's book was one of my favorite accounts. He spoke a lot about Best and about all of the men. Dusty Cleese wrote an amazing account and book biography that was about 15 years after the battle, which has some conflicting accounts with Dickinson.
Yeah, I know.
You know, which is always
He didn't like
fun to
Dickinson
read.
very much.
He didn't like Dickinson.
He didn't like Dickinson.
No, but there was so much to go into. You know, the so many documentaries and audio books and podcasts. You know, that we could delve into it so deep even before we got here. And then once we got here was, you know, the Pacific Aviation Museum with Rod Bengston. He showed me around and put me inside the Douglas, and it was just there was so much to learn. And then, you know, speaking with all the military personnel here, you know, and the military wives, all the children that we had as extras, you know, most of them were military kids. So, you know, there was so much to learn. And even just coming back on this press tour, I went back through some of my some of the books and keep, you know, learning about all these incredible characters that we could have made. There were so many people that could have been lead characters in this. So many interesting, amazing characters.
It was like kind of for us tough to kind of decide which characters we choose because there was, for example, there was Dusty Cleese too, you know, who was also doing more or less. But it was the most interesting thing about Ed's character, and then I have to kind of say something personal. My uncle, and I never told this to anybody here, but my uncle Wolfgang, which I never met in my life, was a fighter pilot in World War II, and he died of tuberculosis because it activated his tuberculosis, and he died after the war. Wow! Because there was not much medical, you know, support at that time, and my dad was always like so pissed about that, because he kind of came back from Russia and and he was like working on the field coughing blood. And he said, "Why are you not in the hospital?" They said, "Well, there is no hospital." And then he died. And my oldest brother, Wolfgang, is named after him.
Really?
Yeah. So that was my kind of personal little to your character, you know.
It is interesting how many just personal stories that even tangentially that you find.
Yeah,
with-
it's like kind of that's I
On
was
all
always-
sides.
Do you ever wish Germany had won?
No.
I'm just curious.
And you know what? It's like kind of. It's also like the interesting. Well, that's a trick question from Woody. You know what?
Just a
I always
question.
like say this. You know, I always like say this now, because look how nationalism is rising again. I mean, look how right-wing parties, especially in Europe, are rising. You know, and I'm like kind of sometimes saying, have they all forgotten? What like kind of bad things happened with nationalism and fascism, you know. Anyhow, anybody else want to answer a question here?
About what?
What kind of made you make this movie, and what did you?
I got really excited about the character that I played because I'm a University of Michigan alum, and I'm talking about it all the time. And it turns out that Lieutenant Commander Eugene Lindsay spent a bit of time doing an aeronautical engineering course there. So I felt like I was representing a fellow Michigan guy, which was really cool. But as far as the research for this is concerned, I mean, as Ed mentioned, there's sort of a overwhelming plethora of information to be gleaned from novels and documentaries, and just from a whole lot of a whole lot of sources where I think I'm just glad that Wes did his homework for the rest of us, and a lot of the consultants and advisors on set kind of filled in the blanks for a lot of the historical stuff that would have otherwise been pretty overwhelming. But yeah, I like that stuff. I don't know about you guys, but I really enjoyed delving into as much history, all the aviation history, and learning about these planes. Those guys were so cool to listen to. I can't believe there was some guy in his 30s that knew everything about torpedo bombers from the 40s, and I was like, man, this guy is just so deep into this history. It's great.
Comes in handy.
Yeah. Especially when you're making a Roland Emmerich movie.
And you, Luke?
Yeah, it was interesting for me because my grandfather was in this war. He was in the Battle of Midway, but he was on the USS Archerfish, which was a submarine, and he was a torpedo guy, and he actually shot down. It was a transport carrier, the Japanese carrier, and he shot it down. It was called the Shinano. And my uncles are lifers in the Navy, so for me it felt like home. And then for the character, my character wrote, and there's not many accounts. I don't know how many characters in this story have written their own books, but mine wrote his own book not far after the war. So he gave the exact accounts of what he went through, so I got to hear his voice, which was really nice, you know.
And actually, so when I first met Luke, it was we were filming the scenes at with Ann Best, with Mandy Moore, inside the house on Ford Island, and Luke came and he had this Clarence Dickinson book, and it was a 1940 edition, signed by the owner in 1941, and it was a beautiful hardback book, which as informative as and incredible as the words were inside it, it was so romantic and beautiful to have this beautiful artifact. It smelt like it had the lovely smell of old books, and Luke lent it to me. I took it back to London in between the Hawaii and Montreal shoots, and was just shitting myself that I was going to lose it or break it, or something like that. But I kept it safe, and I appreciate you for that, Luke.
I mean, I think this movie is also an opportunity for people to explore their own family histories. I mean, I knew coming into it that my grandfather had gone to the Naval Academy, but I realized that I was telling Darren the other day that he was in the same class as Eugene Lindsay, 1927.
That's awesome.
Which is really cool. So they certainly knew each other. And then I started talking to my dad about what he'd done because I just hadn't asked these questions. And we all forget to ask these questions. And unfortunately, he passed away in the late 90s. But it turns out that he was at the Naval Design School probably in the mid-30s, which means he almost certainly worked on the Enterprise doing some design work. So the ship that we're making this movie about, he probably worked on.
Wow.
And I
But
think...
But it's really interesting. I mean, my dad, went through this war, like he was 17 when he went into the war, and he never talked much about it.
They never wanted to, did they? No.
They never wanted to
Yeah.
talk about it. This was like for them. My dad always said Hitler stole his youth, and he doesn't want to talk about it. That's what he said. Hitler stole my youth. I don't want to talk about it.
They got a lot of them saw so many horrible things too that they didn't want to pass it on.
Yeah, it was like, I mean, this was like a small group of, the Nazis were not as populous as you think they were. They were like kind of, when they got elected, it was like 33%.
Right.
And there was a lot of like kind of social democrats and other people, and you know, anyhow, that's a whole other story. Do we have a message, guys, to tell about you know, what we want to tell people with this film, or what you want to tell?
Well, I think a lot of people know about you know, Pearl Harbor or Battle of the Bulge or a lot of incidents that happened in World War II, but they're not very familiar with Midway, and this was such a pivotal battle that really changed the course of the war. I think it's great that people get a chance to see it through this movie.
If it wasn't for this battle, which could have gone the other way, if it wasn't for timing and luck and circumstances, the world may be a very different place today.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, this was in general, it was like that the Americans finally got into the war. It was like kind of godsend, you know. I mean, everybody is like kind of today so critical of America, but like without America, you know, there would be no democracy. Maybe it would be all a fascist world or like a deeply divided world.
Those aircraft carriers, if they had lost them, we didn't really have many more of them compared to them, and no way to project power.
What do you think?
What do I think? I think it's an amazing story that it's interesting coming out of Pearl Harbor and the mistakes that were made from the intelligence side. And when you go back and you look at whether it was sanctions on Japan, whether it was the miscommunication between Washington and the intelligence here, when you talk about the nationalism now, even the bureaucratic mess that they were in then, I mean, there's an extreme similarity between what happens today. And so Midway became certainly from the intelligence side, a way to right their wrongs. You know, Leighton didn't come out with his book until the 80s, because there was just this code of keeping silent, not throwing anyone under the bus, even though he was completely thrown under the bus. So
and
Midway,
Rochefort too.
and Rochefort, absolutely. So from the intelligence side, which is a huge move by Nimitz to keep him on, because I think he knew the passion of these men and of somebody that felt like intelligence hadn't had their moment yet. So it was such a team effort. I mean, without sounding ridiculous, but from every side. And yeah, it was an extreme amount of luck, but all the skill sets of all these different guys and hundreds more, you know, made this what could have been an insurmountable battle. Somehow we pulled it out.
I don't want to say too many more nice things about actors, but that's one of the things that you guys brought was the humanity. So what you're talking about is, you know, there obviously are, you can see when you see the previews the spectacle of this movie, but the redemption story that is your character, or, you know, Dick Best figuring out, you know, how to be a leader. That those are the pieces that I think people ultimately remember. That you all brought such humanity to these roles, and that it's ultimately it is a human story, and it's a human story on both sides, both the American side and the Japanese side.
Yeah, we had a good script.
Thank you, Wes. Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Thank you, Wes.
Yeah, thank you, Wes.
And if I may shout out the spectacle side of what you're talking about, I mean, if you were to read about the Battle of Midway, it's a bit complicated. There's a lot of things that are happening, and then if you were to read it on a page, it's sort of hard to follow. It's something that is sort of a cinematic experience. And so when you, even I don't know that you guys were reading the script, you know, you have these huge sequences that when they're written out in a paragraph, you're like, okay, sure, but in the film, that's a massive part of the storytelling. And so I think when you're trying to tell people the story of Midway, getting to experience it in the theater in a cinematic way, done with the panache that Roland has sort of mastered for many films, it's a really great balance to have this really educational experience matched with the spectacle that the story deserves. So I think that's definitely why you should go see the film.
I also think my grandfather included. It's their story. It's the story of brave men. So it's for them as well. They lost their lives. So this is homage to them and the legacy that they lived. So, and a lot of those guys are not with us anymore. and they soon will be written in the history books. So, yeah, it's for them.
And you can go see this movie on November 8th, Veterans Day weekend.
Yes.
So go and see it.